We're already seeing Ben Johnson's Chicago Bears offense looking different than his Detroit Lions offense, in large part because he has weapons here that can do things they couldn't do in Detroit.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On the show today, I want to look at how this Bears offense is taking shape with the different roles for different weapons. We're finding out more about how Ben Johnson envisions Rome Odunze and how this conversation of like who's the number one wide receiver might start to get a little bit blurry between him and DJ Moore, but I think it'll become more clear by the end of the season. I also want to check in on Colston Loveland's quick emergence in this offense and some of the great plays he's been making and what this tight end room will allow Ben Johnson to do, as well as DJ Moore getting some practice reps in the backfield at running back and what that means for his role in this Bears offense. But we've seen this conversation popping up around Twitter with big, bold predictions of Rome Odunze is going to take over as the Bears' number one wide receiver this season. And it might look that way visually in the Bears offense with how Ben Johnson's going to use Rome Odunze. But I think there's different ways to define what a number one wide receiver is, and it's not as simple as we might think. So there's the idea of like the traditional role in the offense, and then there's the idea of, well, who's getting the most targets, catches, receiving yards, touchdowns. And I think that's going to be two different conversations for this year's Chicago Bears offense. But it's clear that Rome Odunze gives Ben Johnson something he didn't quite have in the Detroit Lions offense. And so I want to start with Ben Johnson, talking about what he's seeing from Rome Odunze and what Rome Odunze provides him. And then we'll explain how that's doesn't quite align with exactly what he had in Detroit and what that can open up then for this Bears offense.
You look at Rome Odunze, what did you see that was already there to look with? A sketch of what you think could.
Yeah, to me, he fits that prototypical X receiver where you can line him up outside the numbers, and provided he gets a one-on-one with a corner, he's going to win most of his matchups. Slant routes, stop routes, go routes, the whole route tree outside the numbers. And that's what I've seen from him so far. He's a really detailed route runner. I think he had a route yesterday in one-on-ones that was really impressive. He's looking one way, breaks the other way, and really snaps it off for a sharp cut. And when you have a long guy that can win contested catches and torque down the field and all that, but yet still can drop his weight and get into and out of routes like he can, that's really a unique skill set that we're going to look to capitalize on.
So when Ben Johnson talks about, the X receiver role, like that's the traditional, Calvin Johnson, number one wide receiver. He's up on the line of scrimmage opposite the tight end, like kind of on an island out there to be that number one guy in that type of role. And so that's part of where you can see the idea of, was Rome Odunze going to emerge as the Bears' number one receiver when Ben Johnson describes him in that type of a role as a special route runner who consistently gets open and creates separation. And I think he is going to play that role in this Bears offense. I do still think DJ Moore will be the player that has more targets, catches, and reception and receiving yards this year. We'll talk about DJ Moore in a little bit. But what makes this look different than his Lions offense is he really didn't have a receiver like Rome Odunze in Detroit. Not a receiver with this kind of route running skill set with the length like he talked about. So really, to oversimplify Ben Johnson's Detroit Lions offense momentarily, when he would have two wide receivers on the field, obviously it's going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. And in the Lions offense, typically in a 2 wide receiver set like that, Jameson Williams is in that X role as that number 1 type of wide receiver spot. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown is on the other side in what they call the Z, where he's off the line of scrimmage and can move around a little bit more. But Jameson Williams isn't really the crafty, precise route runner guy, right? He is the vertical, deep speed, take the top off kind of player who's been in a little bit of a smaller role that's grown, and now he's playing more of a true all-around receiver role now in Detroit at this stage of the process, but certainly not early on. But then when the Lions would go to a 3 wide receiver set, they would, of course, move Amon-Ra St. Brown into the slot, but then they would move Jameson Williams from that like number 1 X receiver position over to the Z receiver position on the other side off the line of scrimmage. And it was Tim Patrick, the number 3 receiver in Detroit, who would come in and play that like X number 1 receiver role in those 3 receiver sets. And like that to me is the closest equivalent that Ben Johnson had in Detroit. It's like he's going from having Tim Patrick in that role as a number 3 receiver, trying to be your X and your alpha number 1 on the outside, to now Rome Odunze being a much, much more upgraded version of Tim Patrick. And that's going to allow his offense to do so much more, because Rome Odunze is not going to be coming off the bench like Tim Patrick was. Like Rome Odunze is first choice, number 1 option at that X spot. And then what you're going to see is DJ Moore be that first choice Z receiver who then likely kicks into the slot, but Luther Burden is going to play a role in there too. And so that's part of where this becomes a little bit more tricky too. But like, he hasn't had a route runner that can just do what Rome Odunze does. Tim Patrick was in that role, but it was such a kind of a limited role in their offense that now, you know, he knows he can have that go-to player instead of feeling like, well, I can like get it to Amon-Ra St. Brown underneath or Jameson Williams deep. Like now I've got this guy who can win up, down, left, right, intermediate, and everything in between that can be a go-to consistent weapon for him. So I think he's going to be able to draw up plays differently, knowing that he has a player of Rome Odunze's caliber in that role, even in 2 wide receiver sets, as opposed to Tim Patrick in that role only in 3 receiver sets, or trying to make Jameson Williams that. But we've seen like they're only recently starting to have Jameson Williams run like a full route tree. You know, they were keeping him a little bit more limited on the types of things they would ask him to do, because that just wasn't his strength and it wasn't his skill set. But Odunze is able to offer so much more in that capacity. And so that's one of the biggest ways that I think this Bears offense is going to look different. Like, yeah, you can compare DJ Moore to Amon-Ra St. Brown, which we will and a little bit later on today. And we can talk about Colston Loveland as building up to be his Sam Laporta. And, you know, maybe even someday Luther Burden can try and be like a Jameson Williams type, although even that I don't think the Bears quite have a Jameson Williams player just yet in this team. And that's where you have these key differentials, right? It's not just like, oh, well, you have a poor man's version of the Lions offense. It's like, no, you have players in this offense that can do things pretty completely differently, or just even in better ways than some of the guys could in his Lions offense. And so it's going to have to look different. And in a lot of ways for the better, because there should be more that Ben Johnson can do with the weapons here, specifically at wide receiver, but also at tight end, where of course, you know, Colston Loveland is a big upgrade to go with Cole Kmet, but like that duo of tight ends is better in Chicago than the combined duo of the Lions tight ends. Maybe Sam Laporta is better than either Loveland or Kmet, but Loveland plus Kmet is greater than Sam Laporta and the Lions' number 2 tight end, Brock Wright. So we'll take a look at how these tight ends can allow Ben Johnson to do some different things in the offense that he wasn't able to do in Detroit next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. I'm saying it too fast. That's how excited I am about it. Excited to fire up the group chat, get your draft boards ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions that we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. I play my fantasy football on Yahoo Fantasy. The Locked On Podcast Network has a fantasy football league coming together on Yahoo, and you should play there too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins August 4th. That's next week. So stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. That's yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. And let's make this fantasy football season the best one yet. Just like Rome Odunze gives the Chicago Bears a wide receiver skill set that Ben Johnson didn't have to the same caliber in Detroit, the same thing is true really for Cole Kmet more than Colston Loveland, but Loveland has been really the emerging player at training camp so far. But certainly the combination of the two is something Ben Johnson did not have with the Detroit Lions and really hasn't had on any team that he's coached up to this point. Because we can make all the Sam Laporta, Colston Loveland comparisons that we want, and I don't think we should expect rookie Colston Loveland to be up to where, veteran Sam Laporta is now, or even rookie Sam Laporta had a pretty impressive breakout season, but he was also the uncontested, clear-cut number one tight end of that season who got 120 targets. And Colston Loveland is not going to get 120 targets, and it's not going to be the uncontested, clear-cut number one tight end necessarily. He might emerge as the number one tight end, but he's also going to have a guy with him on the depth chart, no matter what order they're in. Cole Kmet's going to get targets and going to get a lot of playing time. However, whoever's one or two, they're both going to get playing time. So it's not the same as like Laporta in 2023. His backup was still the same backup he's got right now, Brock Wright, who is clearly inferior to Cole Kmet in pretty much every way. And that's what makes this different for Ben Johnson. But I want to make sure that we start with recognizing like how quickly Colston Loveland is not only getting up to speed, but like thriving. He's making fantastic catches around the field. He looks fast, physical, athletic. He's really looking the part of a top 10 caliber pick tight end who can be a truly dynamic, game-changing player at the position and give them some speed and explosiveness at tight end that unfortunately, like Cole Kmet just can't. Doesn't make Cole Kmet a bad tight end. It just means Loveland is certainly capable of more. And as he gets more and more comfort with the shoulder, which he again is insisting, like, hey, feels great. I'm not worried about it. I'm thinking about it. I'm blocking. I'm taking hits, feeling just fine. It's not really something he's thinking about a ton. That's all great. Like, this is going even faster than I would have thought, given how much time he missed throughout the offseason. But we played on the podcast, I think it was last week. The days kind of blend together. But last week we played a clip of, maybe it was 2 weeks ago now. Ben Johnson talked about how much or how impressed he was with what Loveland was doing off the field while he was absent, and how he's never seen someone as involved in the building as much as Colston Loveland was while he was hurt and all that stuff. We got to hear him rave about what he was doing off the field. Now Ben Johnson is actually getting Colston Loveland on the field, and he's seeing a whole nother layer of really impressed and like everything they thought he would be with the top 10 pick in the draft.
With Colston getting more involved, what have you seen from him in the early stages? I know you guys were very impressed with his rehab, but now he's doing the football stuff more readily. What have you seen?
Yeah, you can't gauge until you get him on the field the football instincts, and it showed up from the get-go. He had a particular block the other day where the defensive end looked to spin out of it, and he was able to anticipate that and able to stay on top of it. So those are things that really stand out to a coaching staff that maybe if you're just a regular bystander, you might not see. And it's really encouraging when you look at a young player like that and the growth that he's going to be able to have the more reps that he gets.
So it's hard not to start getting really excited and maybe even getting carried away with what Loveland's going to be able to do, because again, I will say, like Sam Laporta's 889-yard rookie season where he made the Pro Bowl, like we shouldn't put Colston Loveland's expectations there because it's not fair. They're going to be in different roles. And in that season, Sam Laporta had 86 catches and the number 2 tight end in Detroit, Brock Wright, had 13 catches, right? Cole Kmet is going to have more than 13 catches as long as he's healthy this season. There's going to be more of a sharing of the load that will prevent Colston Loveland from having the type of statistical season that Sam Laporta had as a rookie. But if we envision Colston Loveland in that Sam Laporta role, a reduced version of the role, not like a less talented version necessarily, but just a less featured version of the Sam Laporta role. Then you get to add in Cole Kmet in a much more featured version of the Brock Wright role. Now you've got a very different looking Detroit Lions now to Chicago Bears offense. Like even last season, over the course of a full 17 games played plus the playoffs, the Lions' number 2 tight end last season had 16 targets, 13 catches, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think he forced 1 missed tackle after the catch. Like I'm not here to just like crap on Brock Wright, but like he's an undrafted free agent tight end who is almost primarily a blocker and still ran a decent amount of routes and had a decent role in this Lions offense, but just not someone who really was a factor of any real kind in the passing game. He was a factor as a blocker for sure, but in the passing game, Cole Kmet will be a lot more of a factor. And so for opposing defenses, that means really having to respect both guys. Like I think of Brock Wright as a little bit closer to Mercedes Lewis, right? Where he caught a couple passes as a number 3 tight end, but we knew when he was in the game, they wanted him to be a blocker. And if he needed to be the check down option, he could, and that's about where Brock Wright is, right? His, like, when you talk about like how, like his average depth of target was about 5 yards past the line of scrimmage. You know, a lot of short underneath check down stuff. Cole Kmet gives them a much more vibrant threat there. So then opposing defenses can't just say, oh, well, we know the other tight end who's not Colston Loveland and Sam Laporta. They can't just say, oh, well, we kind of know he's not really a threat. So we can kind of give him some space and some distance and know that if they throw it to him, we'll just run up and tackle him and it won't be that big of a deal. Like Kmet is a lot more of a threat as a receiver there to either make a guy miss out, to kind of run over a guy after the catch, or just be, run a more complex or deeper or important route and not just be the check down option. So when you have 2 guys that can do that, you can come out in your 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, and the play action has that much more of a threat because is Cole Kmet blocking? Is he running out for a pass? You're not as sure what they're going to do. Whereas like with Brock Wright, you're not as threatened by if he does run out for a pass, we'll survive. Like if someone is late because they were trying to stop the run and they were fooled by the play action and you left Brock Wright a little more open than you meant to, he's just not going to burn your defense. And Cole Kmet has a lot more potential and ability to do that. Even if Colston Loveland won't burn you exactly the same way that Laporta did, he still has those same kind of traits, and he has the ability and capability to do so. He might not be as consistently producing it right away this season, but man, that opens up so much more for your offense when you have 2 real threats at tight ends, not just one really good pass catcher and then one blocker who can kind of occasionally catch the ball. So between Adunze being a whole different type of receiver and now Kmet being kind of a whole different type of tight end than what Ben Johnson had, those are 2 of your top 4 weapons in your offense. I mean, in some order, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Loveland, Kmet are kind of your big top 4, and then, Swift, Burden, 5, 6 in some order, Zacchaeus in there too. But like when 2 of your top 4 weapons are providing you different and more things than 2 of your top 4 weapons on your previous offense, it sure is going to look a lot different. And I'm not even fully convinced that DJ Moore's role is just going to be the Amon-Ra St. Brown role in Chicago. Like, I think they can do some similar things, but I'm not sure that it's just going to be a one-to-one translation, especially because it seems like the kind of stuff that Luther Burden would be really good at, but he's a rookie who's missed a lot of practice and is getting yelled at and pulled out of drills when he's not doing them right so far. So he might not be ready for the Amon-Ra St. Brown role. So it's going to be some new and different roles altogether. But I want to look at what DJ Moore's role might look like and hear from Ben Johnson about why they're putting DJ Moore in the backfield and putting him at running back for some packages. We'll take a look at what this all could look like for this year's Bears offense next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at 5-Hour Energy. It's time to fuel up and turn it up with the new 5-Hour Energy Transfusions. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, Transfusion, but minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. So whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Because let's be honest, some days on the course or off the course, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. And that's where the 5-hour energy transfusion can come right in. Whether it's golf or not, it's all about good times with good people, whatever your favorite activity, of course, whatever your favorite activity is, of course, the grape ginger lime flavor can give you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev card. So if you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use our promo code LOCKEDONGolf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. But whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5-hour energy shots today. DJ Moore might be a nice little 5-hour energy shot into this Chicago Bears offense, given how Ben Johnson is getting creative and moving him around. And the big development now is that DJ Moore lining up in the backfield at Bears training camp practice. And that certainly is fun, new, and exciting. But I also want to caution you a little bit on getting too carried away, because this was something they did with Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit, but not maybe as much as you might think. And it's also easy to forget that they did line up DJ Moore in the backfield last season in Shane Waldron and Thomas Brown's offense. And so I'm not sure this is going to be some major new wrinkle for Moore in this offense, but it is something they can sprinkle in occasionally to mess with opposing defenses and maybe get you some favorable matchups. Like, I guess the point being, like, it's not nothing by all means. It's definitely something, but it's not going to be like this huge major role where DJ Moore becomes this gadget player that lines up consistently all over the offense in a bunch of different places. It's more like every once in a while, put DJ Moore in the backfield. But for Ben Johnson, as he explains it here, like, it's much more about saying, like, hey, this player has a skill set where we want to just get the ball in his hands. And one of the ways you can do that is putting him in the backfield and either literally handing it to him or just, throwing it to him from a backfield position where, he doesn't have a cornerback lined up one-on-one across from him to jam him at the line of scrimmage. Like, he's got built-in space to get the ball in his hands and let him work. So here's Ben Johnson's thinking on the process.
Ben, how does using DJ and Cole in the backfield give you an advantage on game days?
Yeah, we're exploring some things. I think what I've seen on tape and what I've come to learn about DJ is he's a physical, he is a run after catch, just get me the ball type of guy. And so whether that's in the backfield, whether that's screens, whether that's, I think he had a nice go route the other day. There's a number of things that we're looking to do and explore to how do we get him the ball and get him in space. And so we're tinkering with that a little bit yesterday, you saw, and he's really receptive to it.
See, a lot of the way he talks about DJ Moore there, like, does sound like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, they used Amon-Ra St. Brown in the backfield. He was this sort of get the ball in his hands kind of playmaker, but not as though he couldn't run routes and get open, just that you wanted to also have space for him. And so it would make sense to try and, like, pigeonhole DJ Moore into an Amon-Ra St. Brown role. And I think we will see more of that, but I think there's, I guess, no pun intended on the more there. But I think there's two things I get stuck on a little bit. Is that, one, I think Luther Burden would be a more natural fit in the Amon-Ra St. Brown role, and that makes things complicated. And B, like, Ben Johnson doesn't specifically need an Amon-Ra St. Brown role player, right? Like, it's not as though this offense only works if you have a deep threat like Jameson Williams and a yards after catch guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, that's what worked in Detroit because those were the players that he had. So he built the system to take advantage of a deep threat speed guy and a yards after catch guy. And it's not as though that's the only way he knows how to have any success with an offense. It's just that's what worked best for there. But in Chicago, he's going to do what works best for these guys, which includes Adunze being more of that traditional number one X wide receiver running routes as opposed to a true, like, Jameson Williams, take the top off speed deep threat in that type of role, which I guess maybe could Luther Burden do, but that's not what Luther Burden was doing in college. So, like, let's take a closer look here on, like, how these players were used, and you can kind of see where neither Moore nor Burden kind of lines up perfectly with what this looked like for Amon-Ra St. Brown. Because in Detroit last season, like I mentioned it earlier, right? Like, so in 2 wide receiver sets, Amon-Ra St. Brown's on the outside opposite Jameson Williams. And then when they go to 3 receivers, Brown moves into the slot. So St. Brown was still, he was out wide about 54-ish% of the time, 55-ish. And he was in the slot about 45%. And then he's in the backfield about 1% of his time last season. It ended up being about like 14 snaps in the backfield last year. So over the course of 17 games, right, that's less than 1 snap per game in the backfield. That's about what DJ Moore ran last year too in the Bears offense. It's about 10 snaps out of the 1,000 he was on the field. It's about 1% of the time he'll line up in the backfield. So to me, like, it's less about specifically DJ Moore in the backfield and more about, well, where are you moving him around and lining him up? Because last year DJ Moore was out wide 77% of the time. He was only in the slot about 21% of the time. So almost about half as much slot time was DJ Moore than St. Brown. St. Brown was in the slot twice as much as DJ Moore was last season. Now, of course, Ben Johnson could just choose to use DJ Moore in the slot more and line up those numbers and just use DJ Moore in that exact same Amon-Ra St. Brown role, and then boom, boom, easy, good to go, right? But then you've got somebody like Luther Burden, who you use a second-round pick on, who has some more like dynamic speed, playmaking ability, make guys miss after the catch. And like at Missouri, he was in the slot 86% of the time last season. And even the same, I didn't do the numbers, but the year before that, he was primarily playing out of the slot at Missouri. He is most comfortable and familiar with a slot wide receiver role. And even at Missouri, Luther Burden was in the backfield last year on 3% of his snaps, like significantly more than Brown and DJ Moore. So like, if you're looking for the player in the Bears offense to be your go-to slot guy who lines up in the backfield sometimes, like that was what Luther Burden's bread and butter was in college more. And so it would make sense that like if you want DJ Moore and Rome Odunze to be outside receivers in your base offense with 2 receivers on the field, then when you go to 3 wide receivers, just make Burden the slot version of St. Brown and make DJ Moore the outside version of St. Brown, and then everybody wins. But then Luther Burden isn't lining up right at practice, and he's missed time with injury, and it's a lot of responsibility to put on a rookie to play slot and outside and in the backfield. Like maybe you want to have more of a smaller defined role for a rookie wide receiver that you don't need him to be Amon-Ra St. Brown as a rookie. Like you've got DJ Moore and you've got Rome Odunze. You don't have to put so much on Burden's shoulders. And so that's where it becomes really tricky here, where it's like, it feels like Burden could be on the Amon-Ra St. Brown path. It also feels like Burden has the kind of deep vertical speed where he doesn't have the kind of size that Jameson Williams has, but like I still think he's got the kind of like ability to take the top off of opposing defense, or at least the length. I don't think Jameson Williams is that much like thicker necessarily, but he is taller and longer and Burden's a little bit shorter and squatter. Like Burden is built a little bit more like DJ Moore physically in that regard. And so how you try and fit these guys, like they just don't fit neatly into Lions wide receiver roles perfectly. Like it's kind of like if you could combine Moore and Burden, that could be like exactly St. Brown, but like they're not quite, not quite either is the perfect replication there. And so I just don't think we're going to see Ben Johnson like force DJ Moore to become Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think.
And how does using DJ?
I think it'll be a similar type of role, and it's why I still think, to bring this back to the number 1 wide receiver conversation, like I think they're going to play DJ Moore in the slot more than he did last year. And I think they're going to move DJ Moore around more than they did last year. And as a result, I still expect DJ Moore is going to lead the Bears in targets and catches this season, assuming all the receivers are healthy over the course of the entire season. So, like, I think Odunze plays he lines up in the role that looks like the number 1 wide receiver in the traditional sense, the number 1 role. But the guy who is the lead passing option, who's the first option in the passing game, who gets the ball the most and is their go-to guy, I think is still DJ Moore. That just comes in the form of a player who's lining up in a lot of different spots and isn't the traditional X on the line of scrimmage outside one-on-one win the ball kind of receiver there. And so that's where this Bears offense is going to look different, but have some shades of what Ben Johnson was doing in Detroit. I think the Bears are still figuring out what exactly that's going to look like. So we can't predict exactly how every player is going to be used. But as we get more updates on what this Bears offense looks like, you can be sure we'll break it down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. If you're looking for a second listen, you should check out the Locked On Bets podcast, where betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily baseball locks and can't miss football futures. So find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Then come on back tomorrow, make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.